See, for instance, if a child is having a breech birth, often what can happen though, that child will go into panic. It feels like it's suffocating or it can't get out. It's trapped, okay? So often you find people who've had very difficult births can often suffer with fear. Yeah. You have that? Okay, well that'll be why. Yeah, because you struggled to come forth as a child. And the fear of death and panic and anxiety will enter into that little child at that time.
The good news is you don't have to go home with it.
Yeah. You don't have to go home with it, Glenn.
We can pray for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, so by the age of 7, it's pretty much set, and that doesn't change. It doesn't really change. I mean, we've ministered to people in the 80s.
Caesarean births, what sort of effect did they have?
Oh, it would just so much depend on so many things, yeah, of what's actually going on with the people, the doctors, and yep, why was it caesarean, you know? So what happens is, though, as we get older, we just learn to develop methods to cope. We have coping methods, how we survive all our problems, all our little demonic spirits and hang-ups. And everybody does. Everyone does. It's true. I mean, we have people come in for ministry and they look like $1 million, right? 10 minutes later, they're a blubbering mess. It's true. Everyone wears the face. Yeah, that's right. Everyone has that on. Yeah. And so we all think everyone else is doing better than us. What's the Bible say? All things are common to man, aren't they? You know, we're all got the same stuff. Yeah, just maybe packaged a little differently. So the good news is, though, is that all of this stuff that has come into our lives has already been dealt with at the cross.
Yes.
Everything. Doesn't matter what it is, what devil or man has done, how bad, how violent, how cruel, how wicked, how anything, it's already been dealt with at the cross. There's nothing in our lives that God has not made provision for at the cross. That is the really good news. It's already done. It's already dealt with. The enemy is powerless. The reason we think the enemy has power in our lives is because we've been conditioned that way since children. How they train an elephant when it's a little baby, they put a wire around its leg and put it on a stake, and it tries to pull away, the wire cuts into its leg, gets festered, and every time it moves it's very painful. Now you see this monstrous elephant in a circus with this little piece of rope stuck with a stick in the ground, right? That thing could turn that entire circus upside down in 5 minutes. But this little piece of rope and a stick is holding it there. Why? It's conditioned. And you see, these demonic spirits and influences have been there from conception, and they've influenced us, ruled over us, affected us, you know, da-da-da-da. So by the time we get to this age, and I think what happens is, you know, we become a Christian, and, you know, like, I'm probably a bit like Glenn, I had a very, very horrific upbringing and past and everything, and violent and karate, all this stuff. And so, you know, you get to a certain age, you get saved, and then you hear, oh, you know, greater is he that's in you, and, you know, Satan's under your feet, and all this stuff, right? And so then you try to get set free, and you have a bit of a go, you know, with your teaspoon of faith, and, and the devil just goes whack, 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 don't even think about it, you know, and you know, and then you hear a bit more, and you have another go, whack, 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 stick your head back in the jar, kid, you know, right? After a few months of that, you start to feel, oh man, I have no faith, I'm a loser, I'm hopeless, you know, and you just start to want to give up. You start to feel condemned. The devil says, see, you've got no power, you've got no faith, you know. But that's not the truth. And we think he's strong, but he's not. All he has is the power of the imagination. Right? The power of the imagination. But the imagination is the most powerful thing that operates in our lives. That's why God says, you know, whatever you can imagine, whatever you can believe for, whatever you can think in your heart, you can have. Because the imagination is incredibly powerful. I'll tell you why it's powerful. You know, I was saying this last night. You can invite someone to get up and give a testimony or take communion next week You can watch the blood drain from their face. You can see them go all stiff. You know, you can see them sometimes start to shake and their mouth goes dry. Now, you haven't touched them. You haven't touched them. And yet all these physiological changes are going on in their body. Right? Fear can be so strong people can die from it. You can be paralysed with fear. But you know, as a kid, if you were taught about boogeymen and dark rooms and all that stuff, I remember as a kid going to my grandparents, in the bed there was snakes all over the floor, there was lions under the bed, and I used to try to jump from the bed to the hallway so they wouldn't all get me. Yes, yeah, you had the same grandparents, I know. It was terrible, lived in a zoo. I don't know how I got out of there alive. But you see, that's how it works, because, you know, that conditioning is like that. As soon as you flick the switch on, you realise there's nothing there, you know. It was just the curtains moving and the coat in the corner, that was a gorilla, and, you know, the cord on the floor was a snake. Right? But that's the power of the imagination, and that's what the devil uses. He uses that, because fear is his connection point.
Yeah.
Faith is God's. Fear is his. That's why there's so much fear in the world today, because that's how he's connecting with people, through fear.
You should fear the Lord as well as one thing, right?
Absolutely, yeah. But that's a holy, reverential, respectful fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when the fear gets from the mind down into your emotion. That's when it can be more traumatised. That's what I've been experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, fear affects the emotions, and then the emotions release chemicals. You know, your body can produce 3,000 chemicals.
That's as many as a fag.
Incredible, isn't it? The human body is phenomenal. Every emotion we feel is coming from a chemical. It's interesting, Glenn said something about, you know, with men who watch pornography. Apparently there's a chemical released that affects the ability for a man to be intimate. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. It affects the inability, a man, makes it difficult for him to become intimate. And apparently, you know, wives that have had husbands struggle with that. Say that's one of the big problems, is there's no intimacy in the marriage anymore. Yeah. So, yeah, everything we feel, we think, we love, the endorphins and all these things that are released into our body. That's why God says, fear not, don't be anxious, because he knows that the chemicals that are released when we fear. So, you know, he tells us these things, you know, because he loves us and he knows how the body's been created. Right, here we go. Okay, so there are those 5 things that, you know, that create this platform of our souls by the time we're 7. And like I said, the good news is that Jesus has already dealt with that. You know, everything. You know, you think of everything that happened to him on that cross, it dealt with whatever we've had, you know, violence, physical abuse, injustice, unfairness, you know. They're big things that are hard to overcome, things like that, you know. Could
you just repeat, what are the 5 things again?
Oh, okay. The sins, curses and iniquities that come down from previous generations. The circumstances surrounding conception, the time of gestation in the womb, circumstances of birth, and the first 7 years.
First 7 years.
Yeah, generally, you know, I mean, they call that the formative years, you know. I mean, it'd be a little different for everybody, and other things can happen later on, of course, like, you know, if a young girl was raped at 13, that's definitely going to have another effect as well.
I heard one research, they said that it's about 70 to 80% is formed by the age of 7.
Right. Yep, 70
So
to 80%.
there's still things that will come after that, but all of the foundations, the majority of it's formed by that age.
At that age, right. Okay, 70 to 80%. Yeah, which is a lot. Yeah. And that's really strong foundational stuff. One of the things that allows the enemy access is in Isaiah 58, around verse 12, it says, God is a repairer of the breach. Now, you know, in the Old Testament, they always had big walls around the cities so the inhabitants could sleep safely and soundly at night. if an enemy wanted to get into that city, it had to breach the wall or breach the gate, make a hole, a breakthrough. Now, all children are meant to grow up feeling secure, like with a wall around them, to feel safe, okay? If that wall gets breached for whatever reason, whether it's, being yelled at, being ignored, being rejected, being unaccepted, being molested, then that wall is breached. And that child always feels vulnerable after that, never feels secure, never feels safe. And especially if it's been, even the slightest sexual touch on a boy or a girl has incredible implications. It's been, my wife and I, we've had a case where a young girl got into the neighbour's place. As the neighbour was passing her back over, he just touched her, just like that. That was enough to just completely change the whole feeling of that girl, how she felt. Maybe your grandfather just touches a child, right? Or a mum or dad. What that does is it completely disorients a child, completely disorients them. Because they're meant to look at their parents, because your parents are your world, right? They're your world. That's all you relate to. So the way they treat you, they react to you, the things they say to you, all of that determines how that child feels about itself. But especially like Glenn said about the physical thing, the body, when that is touched in the wrong place, even for a moment, that can affect that child for the rest of their life. Yeah. And it completely breaches what was meant to be a secure thing. A child is meant to look at its parents as being a safeguard, or grandparents as being a safeguard. When that is broken and that's breached, then that child goes into confusion, because everything that was meant to be strong and solid is now gone. And they don't know who to trust. And it also affects how they see themselves too. Who am I? What's my value now? Those things really affect a child. And also the other things that comes up, of course, is that fear, the spirit of fear. Because when you've been violated or breached, you then have a fear. And you often find with children that have been, violated, it often happens other times in their lives. Because fear attracts. That which we fear comes upon us, is drawn towards us. You get an angry dog and there's 6 people in the room, guess which one he's going to attack? Yeah. Because fear is weakness. Animals see fear as weakness. And so, predators, whether it's male or female, if they have that sort of unclean spirit or predatory spirit or an aggressive spirit, when they sense that fear in somebody, it actually will draw it out of them. That's why you can have 2 people talk to the same man, right? Say he's a confident businessman. And say Val was a very fearful, intimidated sort of person, and she might talk to that chap and come away and think, oh man, he's really dominating and pushy and, and just, in your face, Now, so I'm a very confident, sort of business person myself. I go and talk with him and we'll just get on fine. I'll come back and say, what do you mean? He's great. Same man, 2 different people. One is by their fear is drawing out. Will actually draw from that person. Someone gets married, a woman with a lot of fear, marries a nice guy, but all of a sudden he starts to become aggressive and dominating. Because her fear will draw it out.